Hi, everyone. My name's Lilly. I'm an alcoholic. 8:30, Saturday night. I'm fully clothed. I hope in my right mind. Before I forget, I want to thank Missy for asking me to come down here and share with you. I had no idea it was this big. And I just got to tell you right up front that there's nobody more amazed than I am that I'm up here. It blows me away. You know, I'm no different than you are. I'm a woman alcoholic that by the grace of God has found her way to AA. And I don't know about you, but I'm sticking around. And I also want to thank Mary for being such a great hostess. I think yesterday she pushed the panic button. She couldn't find me, and she called me and on the phone number that she had, which was my home number, and got my 93-year-old mother. And I just want to say to you, Mary, you're lucky that she didn't ask you if you were in distress, because quite often at home, my mom knows where I am these days, you know, and I take care of my mom, and that's a privilege. And when I'm not home, Mom knows where I'm at. And if anybody calls and they sound like they're a little distressed or anything, she'll say, well, you know, Lily's at a meeting. Now, that meeting is from 8 to 9. Now, she should be home at 9:30. Are you okay? You know, you could read pages 60 to 63 in the big book. My mother's not an alcoholic. I have 4 brothers, and none of them are alcoholic, you know. And they always, once in a while, like usually on St. Patrick's Day, well, not usually, once in a while on St. Patrick's Day, they might drink a little too much. And whenever they drink a little too much, they say, hey, sis, how come you're the alcoholic? And I always have to say, I don't know, but I'm the lucky one. And I really believe that. I am the lucky one. You know, there are times when I'd like to dunk them in alcohol and bring them here, because I think they could use the 12 steps. I'm not taking their inventory. Oh, who am I kidding? Of course I am. So I had my first drink of alcohol at the tender age of 19, and the occasion was my wedding reception. And you know, I didn't come from a dysfunctional family. I know a lot of you did. I didn't. That is not my story. I was brought up in a home where my mom stayed home every day. She cooked and she baked and she did the dishes and she ironed and she did all the things that stay-at-home moms do. And my dad went to work every day, and you could set your clock by him coming home every night. He got home every night between 4 and 4:15, and he would walk in the house, and my mother would always be at the kitchen sink doing the pre-dinner dishes. And he would walk into the house and he would say, hi, honey, how was your day? Where are the kids? You know, and she could rattle off where every one of us were, you know, and so nobody in my house was getting beat up. Nobody in my house was swearing at anybody. Well, maybe once my father suggested to my mother how to cook something, and she said, if you don't like the way I'm cooking it, why don't you fry your ass? And I think that was the only time I ever heard. My father didn't say anything. Anyway, you know, I went to Catholic schools as a kid. The reason that I went to Catholic schools is because when I was in middle school, my mother found a dirty joke in my pocketbook, and she figured that if they sent me over with the nuns, it would straighten me out. Unfortunately for me, I decapitated the statue of the Blessed Mother. And now this is before I'm drinking, so I just so you know, I mean, things happen when I'm around. Things just happen. And things still do happen, you know. I just want to tell you that, let me just tell you this little story about before I had my first drink of alcohol. When I was a senior in high school, if your date was not a member of the graduating class, they could not participate at the banquet. Am I standing too close to this thing? And so anyway, okay. So anyway, my mom and dad saved up their money, and they got me this beautiful dress, and it had a big hoop skirt, you know, And I had these white, they're all in style now, those, stiletto heels. But back when I graduated from high school, that was the style, white high stiletto shoes. And his parents invited us to go out to a place called the Portlander. And it was a very, very fancy hotel. Well, I was brought up, I didn't know I was poor until about 5 years ago. And so we went to this place, and I'm all dressed up with this beautiful dress with a hoop. And I don't know anything about a dress with a hoop. So the first thing I did was sit down, and the front of the dress went like that. So now you're like trying to tuck it under the table. And they brought these menus, and they were huge, and they had a big tassel hanging off of them. And his father said, you can have anything you want. They had things on that menu I had never even heard of. Well, I promptly ordered the filet mignon. And the waitress wanted to know how I wanted it. And I said, cooked. They brought it to the table, and I went to cut it. Well, I wasn't very impressed with it. I got to tell you, it didn't look like much to me, but what do I know? And so I went to cut it, and when I did, it slid off the plate. And so I kicked it under the table. I don't know what the hell to do, So I kicked it under the table, and then his father looked up, and of course the only thing I had left on my plate was a baked potato, and I just said to him, I was so hungry. Anyway, after the meal was over, we got up and got ready to leave, and when I stood up, I realized I had skewered that steak with the heel of my shoe. So I sort of walked out. Did a little Groucho Marx walk to get out of there, Got out on the sidewalk, and I'm trying to scrape it off my shoe, And 6 months later, I added alcohol. The occasion was my wedding reception. It was at a place that later would become the Sahara Club, which was a wonderful place for alcoholics to hang out. But at the time of my wedding reception, it was the VFW. And I didn't know anything about drinking because nobody in my house was getting drunk. And so we waltzed in, and I had another beautiful dress with a big hoop. And my dad walked me up to the bar, and he said, honey, what are you going to have? And I said, I don't know. What are you having? And he was going to have a whiskey and ginger. I was like, all right, well, I'll have one too. So if you've ever drank in those service clubs, you know what it's like. You get like a lot of whiskey and a little bit of ginger. And he said, here's to you, kid. And what I knew about drinking, I'd seen on TV. Lucy and Desi were going to cocktail parties, And so I downed it. The next thing I was doing was taking my wedding dress off on the front lawn of the place. And that's the way my drinking was going to be. I drink, I lose my clothes. I don't know what would happen to them. They would just be like, 1 minute they'd be there, and then they'd be gone. Did that ever happen to you? I mean, what the hell is it with women that drink? We got to take our clothes off, I don't know. I'm just saying that's the way it was for me, take my clothes off, I'd get in a fight. And I was a lightweight, I could drink like one drink and I'd be drunk, and then I'd be off to the races, I'd be having a fight or dancing on the bar, or, just stirring up a little excitement. And anyway, the man that I married was alcoholic. I didn't know that he was an alcoholic. I didn't know what alcoholism was. And I just want to say that one night I overheard him talking to a friend, and they were going to do some serious drinking. That appealed to me. Serious drinking. I knew I wasn't a serious drinker. I mean, one drink and I'd be drunk. I want to be a serious drinker. Didn't you all want to be a serious drinker? I wanted to be a serious drinker. So I called his friend up. I didn't ask my husband. I called his friend. I said, hey, Pete, how do you get to be a serious drinker? And he said, well, Lily, for somebody like you, you probably ought to coat your stomach before you go out. I said, really? Well, what do you coat it with? And he said, a little vegetable oil. I'm an alcoholic, and, a little to me was a half a cup. I drank a half a cup of vegetable oil. If you haven't done that yet, I just want to tell you don't have to. I've done that experiment, and it doesn't do anything for you. Just makes it all come back up really quick, you know. But I kept practicing, you know, I kept practicing. And one day, lo and behold, I was an alcoholic. You know, the man that I married, the last night that we spent together, we almost killed each other. You know, he was a violent alcoholic. I didn't know that. I did not know I didn't know anything about alcoholism, you know, and my way of dealing with it back then was he would try to quit drinking and I would think to myself, well, he's the one with the problem. I don't have a problem. I don't have to stop drinking. He's the one with the problem, you know, and, you know, that marriage was just doomed. That marriage was doomed, you know, but in the short time we were married, we had 4 children and we lost a daughter to SIDS. And I think that for him, that just was, for him, the frosting on the cake, because from that day on, his drinking was worse than it had ever been, and I began to realize that he really had a problem, and he was stealing the grocery money and stealing the kids' money out of their bank to buy booze. And anyway, the last night we spent together, we almost killed each other. You know, he came in, he didn't like something that I had done. I was 6 months pregnant. He kicked me in the ribs, broke 4 ribs, and then knocked my 4 front teeth down my throat. And then I put a pan to boil on the stove of boiling water, and when he came out in the kitchen, I threw it at him. And he went into shock, and then I dragged him across the floor and pushed him out a second-story window. When the cops came, I had on my granny, you know, remember those granny robes, those quilted granny robes? Yeah, I had one of those, a big belly out to here, bleeding from my mouth, and I'm standing on the roof with a vacuum cleaner that I was proceeding to drop on his head. Because my best thinking was, if I killed him, I would get his Social Security. Just a little thought I had, you know, just a little thought. My problem is that I have great ideas. I have great ideas. I'm here to tell you. Anyway, we divorced. Became very clear to me very soon after that divorce that he couldn't support us because he was really an alcoholic, almost to the end of, I mean, he was at the end of his line already. And I was just getting started. And you know, I saw some gals walking around here this weekend and they had, what I like to call alcoholic women. Superwoman. Right? We don't need you. We don't need you. I don't need your money. I don't need your advice. I can do this all by myself. I can be the doctor, the lawyer, the Indian chief. I'm going to do it all. So after the divorce, I went to college. After college, I bought a house. I had no business buying that house, but I bought it anyway. And I proceeded to raise 3 children as a single mother with a big S on her chest. You know, back then they were doing all these studies, you know, about single parents and the children from single parent families didn't do as well at school. And the very first day of school, I marched up and had a chat with the principal and said, that's all bogus bullcrap, you know, and I don't want to hear any excuses. If they're not behaving, you call me up, I'll straighten it out, you know. So I had this alcoholic attitude. You know, but what happened was now I'm in my own house with my own kids and I can go and do what I want to do. And I began to go out drinking with my friends. And things would happen for me. You know, I would end up somewhere. I never would end up where I was supposed to be at home with my kids. I would end up in places I didn't even know where I was. I'd have to go out on the street and see the street sign to figure out where I was. And I didn't like that about me. You know, I just didn't like that about me. And I thought, well, you know, what am I going to do about that? And it was about that time I had one of my great ideas, you know. And what I did was I decided to go to the store and buy a 12-pack of beer and strategically place it throughout the backyard. I would mow the grass, and when I'd get to a beer, I'd stop and have one. And that worked, you know. I did that whole lawn. It was great. I drank the 12-pack. I went back in the house. The kids were in the house. I was in the house. Wow. I mowed the lawn every day. Every day I mowed that lawn. Some days I'd get out there with scissors and I'd cut it, you know, and trim. Yeah, that was me. And then it got to be fall in Maine and, you know, the grass ain't growing. I'm like, well, I got another good idea. I'll just rake it every day. You know, I raked the lawn every day, you know. And in the winter, I shoveled it, you know, and I was nuts, you know, I was off to the races, you know, and And I had a really good job, and I quit that job to become a bartender. And if you're a drunk like I'm a drunk, you got to get a job as a bartender, because you know what? I couldn't afford to pay for the amount of booze that I had to get on board every day. And so I had to get a job someplace where there was all those bottles lined up, and I could steal as much as I could get my hands on. And trust me, it was a lot, you know. And then I was doing all these crazy things, you know. And I just want you to know that underneath all of that, this is the deal. If you're an alcoholic like I am, you're doing things that you don't like. You know, I was doing things that I didn't like. My youngest son got in trouble at school. By now I have a job as a bartender. I'm working the happy hour crowd. You know, I would have a drink. They'd say you could have a drink an after shift drink. If you're a bartender like I'm a bartender, you're having a before the shift drink, a during the shift drink, and after the shift drink, and however many drinks you can get in. And one day I got a phone call. My son was in trouble, and they wanted me to come. And so I ate eucalyptus cough drops, drove up to the school, and, you know, because now I'm going to go rescue this kid. And they said he was selling marijuana, and you know, so I called the chief of police to have him test it, because I didn't believe it was marijuana. It wasn't. It was oregano. But I had to go before the school board. Yeah, so I got all dressed up like Harper Valley PTA. I had hair down to my waist. You know, I had hair down to my waist. I was a skinny little thing. I weighed about 95 pounds. You know, I was all that in a sandwich too. And I go over there, you know, I got to go before the school board. I take the kid with me and I go, okay, listen, now I'm going to show you how to beat those people at their own stupid game. So now I've gone from being a single mother that will not accept poor behavior to somebody that's going to show this kid how to beat the system. And I walk in there like Harper Valley PTA, and the school board's like giving me all this crap, you know, I'm like, give me a break. Anyway, one of them said, well, my son is a Boy Scout. He wouldn't do anything like that. And I said, you know what? You are a miserable moron. I said, your son is in the same Boy Scout troop with mine. What the hell do you think they're doing out behind the barn, you know? Well, they recommended that my kid go to an alternative school. I took him to that alternative school. I dropped him off, and I thought, oh, my God, I've dropped him off with a bunch of animals. The very next day, I started volunteering there. You know, a year later, they hired me. You know, and my alcoholism was running rampant. And I got to tell you that this beautiful, beautiful home that I bought was beginning to be destroyed by my alcoholism. You know, where there were punch holes in the doors. There was not a door in the house had a real lock on it. There were 13 windows in the house. 13 windows had bullet holes in them. I don't know if I was shooting out. The neighbors were shooting in. To this day, I don't know. But I had really good ideas. Really good ideas. You know, I don't know what happened to the front seat of my car, but something happened to the front seat of my car. I mean, things would disappear too, you know. Like, how the hell do you lose the front seat of the car? I don't know, but I did. You know, and so now I got a milk crate bolted to the front seat and a pillow on it, and I'm driving around, you know. And about this time, I also didn't like who I was. Now, I had to come to Alcoholics Anonymous to find that out. I just thought that I was really cool. I would wake up in the morning and decide who I was going to be. Today, I'm going to be a cowgirl. And I would dress all up like a cowgirl, you know, to have the skirt and the boots and the hat and the vest and oh. And I also had graduated from being a bartender at the AMVETS to being a bartender at the Silver Spur Saloon. Yeah. So I'm driving home one night about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I'm absolutely sideways, and the blue lights come on. Now, I am not an idiot. I know. Do not open the door. Because if he sees you sitting on a milk crate, there is going to be a problem. I didn't think anything about the fact that I was loaded. I just thought, if you open the door and he sees you sitting on a milk crate, you probably can get arrested for that. You know, so they come up and they knock on the window. You know how they do. What are you doing? So I roll down the window and he goes, where have you been? I said, do you want me to tell you the truth or do you want me to tell you a lie? He said, well, of course we want you to tell the truth. And I said, well, my horse died. And I have just come from burying him. And he said, where do you live? And I said, oh, just up the street. And he said, why don't you get there, you know? So that's the way, I'm getting great ideas. they're coming fast now, I got to act fast so I don't forget them, And one night we're all working at the Silver Spur Saloon. It was hot in Maine. We do get a few hot days. And we're all pretty loaded. And we decided we should go skinny dipping after the place closed, right? And we were going to go up and jump off this bridge. I wouldn't jump off that bridge for $1 million. But drunk, I'd do anything, So we go up there and we take our clothes all off. Now, I also had this little trick that I was doing about this time, too. I would, whenever I was going to, sleep in my car for the night, checking into the little Pontiac hotel, I would take the keys and I would put them on the top of the passenger tire outside the car. Did any of you think of that? Say, I'm a genius. And, so we get up to this place where we're going to jump off the bridge and we take our clothes off. It's 3 guys, 3 girls. Take our clothes all off. I got the keys on the tire. Next thing you know, and we're jumping off this bridge and you're slapping your ass against the water. I'm telling you, it hurts. And, we're lucky we didn't get killed. There was rocks under there and everything. So it's 2:00 in the morning, Well, all of a sudden we see blue lights. I tell them, I got a good idea. Let's swim downstream. So we're all swimming downstream, and we're being really quiet, like only 6 drunks can be at 2:00 in the morning. And we get out of the water and we come up behind somebody's house. We're tiptoeing through the tulips, being really quiet, We get up there where the car is, and those cops took our clothes. Yeah. One of the guys that was with us was married, and he says to me, Lilly, my wife is going to be really pissed if I show up with my hair all wet. And I said, Gil, do not let that worry you. You just get right in the front seat and stick your head out the window, and I will drive really fast, and you can blow dry your hair. Yeah, so we're all in the car, we're all naked, we're driving up the road. He's got his head stuck out the window, blow drying his hair, And the blue lights come on. Yeah. I say, let me handle this, So they come up, they knock on the, I roll the window down, Cop shines the light in. 6 naked people in the car. He says, what are you doing? I said, we're really hot. We're just riding around trying to get cooled off, Where do you live? Just down the street. Why don't you get there, So those are the kinds of things that I'm having great ideas, and they just one followed another, and I mean, I could stand there all night and tell you all those great ideas. One just followed another, The bottom line is this. At the end of my drinking, I will tell you one more story. By now I'm working for the school department. I have summers off and I got a job. I got a job babysitting somebody's dogs that lived on the lake, and they had every toy you can imagine, right? So I said to the lady that owned the house, do you think it would be okay if I borrowed your boat? I said, I would like to sell sandwiches to the fishermen out there on the lake. She said, sure. So the next morning, I'm all excited. I made a couple sandwiches, I made some coffee, and I got a good idea. I thought, today I want to be Jimmy Buffett. So I dressed all up, in the Hawaiian garb for Jimmy Buffett. And I, if you're going to be Jimmy Buffett, well, you got to take the Jimmy Buffett music down there. And, they have a boat that has a tape player in it. And I got my music. Well, what the hell? If you're going to have all that stuff, you ought to have a pitcher of margaritas, So I get my pitcher of margaritas. And next thing you know, and it's 7:30 in the morning, and I'm drunk, and I'm cruising around the lake, and I'm sitting up on the back of the seat, and I'm steering the boat with my foot. Because if you have a really good idea like selling sandwiches to fishermen, you got to have one hand to hold your drink and one hand to go, hey, you want to buy a sandwich? And I always knew, too, just before a little power nap was going to overcome me. I always knew that. I only found out when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, they call that passing out or blackout. But anyway, I felt a power nap coming on, and I laid down in the boat. However, I forgot to pull the throttle back. And if you're in a boat and nobody's steering it and it's going full throttle, it's just going around and around in circles. And they sent the Boy Scouts to try to rescue me, Yeah. That's the kind of ideas that I had, And now I knew that I was alcoholic, and I knew that I was an alcoholic because this beautiful home that I had destroyed. I mean, I absolutely had destroyed this house. I cut the carpet all up. There was no carpet left in the house. None. It was down a bare subfloor, and, it just was this crazy house. I'd go to the bar. I was a barfly. I hung out there every day. I started drinking at places like the Top of the East, and I ended up at a place called the Dump on the Hump, and the reason that I went to the Dump on the Hump is because the guys that were at the Dump on the Hump didn't care how much you drank. They didn't care nothing. They don't care. Just don't drink my drink, And I'd pull the fire alarm. They'd all go outside. I'd scrape all the money off the bar. They all come back in. I'd set them all up, buy them all a drink. Oh, my God. I'm tired just thinking about it, It was a lot of work, And by now I knew that I had a drinking problem. I didn't know that I was an alcoholic, but I knew I had a drinking problem. And I made the promise that every alcoholic makes: tomorrow I won't drink. And if you're anything like I am, you never tell that promise out loud. You never say those words out loud to anybody, because what if you can't do it? You can't let anybody know that you might fail. Got to be Superwoman, so I never said it out loud. But I'd make that promise to myself: tomorrow I won't drink, and tomorrow would come and I couldn't not drink. Then I'd make the next promise that an alcoholic makes: tomorrow I won't drink till 4. Tomorrow I won't drink till noon. The hell with it. It's 4 o'clock somewhere, And I'm drinking without my own permission. On the night before my last drunk, I dyed my hair purple. Long before it was fashionable for women to have purple hair. As Marguerite came up here, she had, it was nice. But I had purple, outrageous purple hair, and I just thought I was something. And I went to the bar and I told the bartender that I thought I might be an alcoholic. I wasn't sure. He could keep the drinks coming while I made up my mind. Yeah. And then at some time in the night, I said to him, I'm going to ask God to give me a sign. If I'm really an alcoholic, God's going to give me a sign. Well, I must tell you that by now I had traded in the seatless Pontiac for a 23-foot van because I fancied myself to be an athlete, and I needed to get a vehicle to carry my athletic equipment in. And what I had was a set of darts. Yeah. Very soon after that, I had a bed in the back of that van. I had a Coleman cooler that always had booze in it. I had a change of clothes, a mirror, makeup. I was like living high. I was living high, all right, and drugs isn't a big part of my story, and I'll tell you why. I did marijuana one time, and I was in a bar stool, and I was sitting on this bar stool, and I'm thinking to myself, I didn't need a ladder to get on this stool, but I'm going to need one to get off, and I was so high I could have gone duck hunting with a rake, and then I fell asleep, and so I didn't do that anymore because, that just got in the way of my drinking. I'm just not, no, that wasn't good for me. I don't know what it did for you, but that's what it did for me, put me out. Anyway, so now I live in a house with subfloor, when the bar closes, you can all come to my house, we'll drink, we'll put the cigarette butts out on the floor, spill drinks on the floor, who cares, I don't care. And here's the deal. If you're an alcoholic like I'm an alcoholic, really and truly, that's where alcoholism took me. And as I looked around, it was okay. It was okay. See? If you've ever been in that place, your normal becomes so crazy that you think everything's okay. That's not who I was brought up to be. But I really thought that everything was okay. I mean, what is the problem? So there's no carpet on the floor. So what? Who cares? It's not a big deal. It's just not a big deal. I didn't even know there were bullet holes in the window until I was five years sober. My brother came to live with me, and he's opening all the drapes, and he's just like, what the hell happened? I don't know. Anyway, so that night I told the bartender that I was going to ask God to give me a sign. And that night I went out and I got in the back of my van and I knelt down and I said a little prayer and I said, God, please give me 1/10 of the faith that my mother has. I want to tell you that at this time in my life I drove school bus. I drove a 23-foot van, 15-passenger van driving behavior problem kids to school. So I worked in a school for kids with behavior problems. I should have been one of those kids. Anyway, the next morning I'm I got a full load on, and I'm driving. We had to drive like 25 miles across a backcountry road to get to school. And I began to sweat profusely. I was like, what the hell's going on, you know? And then I got a pain, not pain, but like this unbelievable pressure in my chest. And then I got a pain in my jaw, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my God. And I got that sense of impending doom it talks about in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I knew something bad was wrong. You know, I was like, please, God, please, please, please do not let me go off the road with these kids in the car. Do not let me go off the road with these kids in this vehicle, you know. And what happened was I made it to work that day, and I walked in, and I got in my office, and I collapsed with a massive coronary. And I remember waking up on the way to the hospital in the ambulance thinking it didn't need to be that big a sign. And so now I'm in the hospital. They called my younger brother and my mother to come in, and unbeknownst to me, they told them that I would probably die before the night was over, and that they didn't think I would make it. And I sort of came to. My eyes were still closed, but I sort of came to, and all of a sudden I realized there were tubes everywhere. There could be tubes and monitors and everything, and I realized that the pillowcase under my head was white, and my hair was purple. And my brother come over, and he said to me, Jesus, what happened? And I said, my God, I don't know, but whatever they're giving me, it's turning my hair purple. Now, I knew that was a lie. I absolutely knew that was a lie, but I believed it, you know, because if you're a drunk like I'm a drunk, you tell lies quick, and then you believe that crap yourself, you know. So this is what happened for me. This is the what happened part of my story. The what happened part of my story is I was in the hospital until November the 8th. And I call November 8th my sobriety date, even though my last drink was on October 29th. And I'll tell you why. Because my house was in such a shambles. You couldn't tell the clean clothes from the dirty clothes. I mean, the place was it was just a wreck. It was just an absolute wreck. And I couldn't let my family take me home. My family they didn't see me drinking, you know, because I would go to the mandatory family outings, I called them, you know, the Christmas and the Thanksgiving and all that. But I always had an excuse. I got to get out of here. I got to leave. The car don't run right. And I'm going to run out of gas. You know, the tires are a little low. You know, I got to get home and check the oil, you know, but I always had an excuse. Anyway, what happened was I couldn't let my family take me home, and so I had a complete stranger take me home and drop me off the end of my driveway. And I walked up to my house, and my house was completely dark, and I walked up, and there was a note on the door from the bank, and they were foreclosing on my house. And I went inside the house, and there was no light, no heat, no telephone, no groceries, no running water. Everything had been shut off, no kids, no nothing, and I went to the bar. I went to the same bar that I'd always gone to. And I sat down in the same seat I always sat in. And I looked up and I ordered a shot of tequila and a beer chaser, because that was me at the end of my drinking. You know, I drank probably between 24 and 30 cans of beer a day with shots of tequila in between. And I doctored my hand all up to do that shot of tequila, and I looked up and I saw myself in the mirror. And what I saw scared me to death. I thought, oh my God. I'm a helpless, hopeless, pathetic, drunk mother. And my kids deserve better than this. And I put the drink down. I never drank it. I put it down. I walked out of there. The next day I went to work. There was a woman at my work that loved me very much, and she wrote me a letter, and she said, I wrote you a letter, and I want you to go home and read it. And I went home and I read this letter. And in the letter she said, we love you very much here at school. She says, and it broke our hearts to see you leaving in an ambulance. And I suspect that you might have a problem with alcohol, and it would be my privilege to take you to a meeting. And the reason that I know about Alcoholics Anonymous is because I'm a member in good standing. And I thought, what? A-B-I-T-C-H. Well, la-dee-da. I am not going to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't even know what it was, but it didn't sound good to me. That afternoon, I had a doctor's appointment. I went to my doctor's appointment. He said, Lilly, I want to tell you something. He said, you know why you had a heart attack? Because you abuse alcohol. You know how I know you abuse alcohol? Because when we were doing the tests on your heart, we discovered that you have third stage cirrhosis of the liver. And if you do not quit drinking, you'll be dead in 5 years. And if you can't quit drinking on your own, you better go to AA. It was twice in one day I heard AA. Not happy. Anyway, so this woman said, I I'd love to take you to a meeting. So I had just enough people-pleasing left in me to say that I would go with her. But as it got closer to the time to go, I knew I wasn't going. Did you ever do that? Sit on the bar stool and promise somebody the moon when it's time to deliver? Yeah, forget it. I'm over here getting drunk. Yeah. Anyway, I knew that I wasn't going to go. She invited me to dinner at her house, and I knew I wasn't going to go. And that 1/10 of the faith that my mother had came to me like this. I heard my mother's voice say, if you're not going to go, at least call her up and tell her it would be really rude not to show up. My mother was nowhere near me, but that's what happened for me. I heard my mother's voice. And I went to the phone to call this woman, and the phone was dead. I owed Ma Bell about $760 because, I'd get telephonitis when I got drunk, and I didn't care, Anyway, it never occurred to me to go to a phone booth. I drove 15 miles to her house to tell her that I couldn't come. She said, come right in. She had a gift for me. It was all wrapped up, had a big bow on it. I unwrapped it. Blue book, big white letters, Alcoholics Anonymous. And I do not want to forget how I felt at that moment. I broke out in a sweat again, and I'm thinking, how in the hell am I going to get out of this? And so she said, why don't you read what I wrote? And so I opened it up, and on the front page of the book, she wrote, to Lilly, my friend with love. May you someday know how important this day is to me. Fasten your seatbelt and welcome to the greatest adventure of your life, one day at a time. And we went to a meeting that I didn't want to go to. I did not have a desire to quit drinking. I had a desire for you to get the hell off my back about my drinking. We go to this meeting. There's a little old guy standing outside this meeting full of smoke. This little old guy standing out there. He looked to me to be about 80 years old, and he was shaky. Sticks his hand out at me. Sticks his hand out and goes, welcome, you're amongst your own kind. And I'm thinking, I don't think so, bucko. Come right in. I go in. The next person I see was as tall as he was short. He was so tall that his belt buckle came to my eyes. And on that belt buckle it said, bullshit. Yeah, and he had a big toothy grin, and he kept saying, oh, it just keeps getting better and better and better. What a moron, I'm sitting in the third row in the end seat, and I am thinking, I have sunk to an all-time low now. Yep. What a bunch of losers. Yeah. They all went around. They were so happy. And I gave myself away immediately because I went to the front of the room and sniffed the coffee pot. Because I figured there had to be something in the coffee because nobody could be that happy without drinking, Then they went around the room. This woman said, let's open the meeting with a moment of silence. And like that, you could have heard a pin drop. Everybody's in their seat. And then they start going around the room and they're introducing themselves. And they go, I'm an alcoholic. My name's Jim. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm thinking, you got to be kidding. Well, they get to me. Well, I can't be the only one there that's not an alcoholic. So I said, well, I'm Lilly. I'm an alcoholic. And then this lady got up, and I'm sure she gave a wonderful talk. I have no idea what she said. Nothing. But she did say something that would save this drunk's life. Okay? This is what she said. She said, here at the Portland Group, we have a way to help you start a new way of life by offering you a white chip. And I'm sitting in the third row in the end seat, and I'm thinking, you have got to be kidding. You don't drink, and they pay you off in poker chips? Oh, so excited, I can hardly stand it. What she said next, though, were the words that would save this drunk's life, and that's what these words were. If you are too afraid to pick up a chip, see me after the meeting, and I'll give you one. I did not know until I started working the steps that I have always been driven by 1,000 forms of fear. And the way that I would act that out is I would get in your face. The scarer I was, the more in your face I was, You might be going to clean my clock, but I did not care. I was going to get a sandwich on the way out, And I had some fights with some pretty big people because of that attitude, And anyway, I was not about to let this room full of losers know that I was too afraid of anything. Yeah, marched straight up there and got the white chip. Marched straight up there and got that white chip, and something happened. The whole room applauded. I was like, whoa, this is cool. Nobody was applauding in the places I was hanging out. They were like, oh shit, here she comes, And this beautiful woman after the meeting, I'll never forget it. I've never seen her since, but I know she's still sober and somewhere in Maine. But her name was Pearl, and she came up to me and she said, keep coming back. And I have a disease of perception. And I thought she said, we need you. And I looked around, and I really thought, well, this place could use an exalted ruler, and maybe I'll apply, You look like you needed a little guidance to me. And, the wisdom of 30 seconds of sobriety, and, so I kept going. I was going to one meeting a week. I didn't know any different. And I was hanging out at the mall, and at that time in the mall, they didn't serve alcohol, so that was the only safe place I could be. I could go to the mall. And I can remember going into the manager of this one store, and one day he had on a 3-piece suit and a painter's hat, and he was climbing up, putting a sign up somewhere. And I go over and I said to him, don't you feel like an idiot? You're all dressed up in a 3-piece suit, and you got this stupid looking hat on your head, you just look like an idiot. He was glad when I found out there was a meeting every day. Yeah, he was glad when I found out that, And then I got this sponsor, because I read the steps, they have them hanging on the wall, and I read the steps, and I picked this woman because I drank with her, and I figured I wouldn't have to do a 4th and 5th because she'd already seen me in my heyday, And then I thought, well, the 9th step really appealed to me. I'd heard that my ex-husband was in the program, and he owed me about $150,000 in back child support, and I thought, well, I think I'll just stick around until he makes his amends. Yeah, I'm still waiting. And but anyway, I got this sponsor, and she, we immediately started working the steps. And then she would do this stupid thing like call me at 6:00 in the morning. And I would call her at 6:00 in the morning. And if you called at 5 minutes to 6, she'd hang up on you. If you called her at 5 past, she wouldn't answer the phone. I knew she was there. And I'd say, what's up with you anyway? You are pathetic. What's up with this? And she said, I'm teaching you to be responsible. I told you to call me at 6. So she'd call me at 6:00. I'd call her at 6:00. And then she'd say, we'd read something out of the, one day at a time, or out of the big book, or, whatever the hell she decided we were going to read out of that morning, just to make sure I had all that literature handily available, And then she would say to me, what meeting are we going to? What meeting you going to tonight? And I'd be like, I think I'll go to the big book, over to St. Joe's. Great, pick me up. Then I heard people at meetings saying something about 90 and 90, but she didn't say 90 and 90 to me, So then one day I said to her, what's this 90 and 90 business? And she goes, that's 90 meetings in 90 days. So I go to 90 meetings in 90 days. I go, what now? She goes, 91. Yeah, great. At 30 days sober, I didn't think I could stay here with you. I'm going to these meetings, and every meeting I went to, I'm hearing, it's progressive, fatal, cunning, baffling, powerful, terminal, sad. It'll kill you. And I'm thinking, lighten up, my God. I don't know as I can stay here with these people, I'm thinking, oh my God, I can't do it. So I decided at home it's a red chip at 30 days, and I called it the blood chip, I'm going to get the blood chip, then I'm going to go get drunk. And so I'm sitting in the front row because they taught me that, sit in the front row. If you come, I belong to the Scarborough Route 1 group. We meet on Thursday night at 7:30. If you come there, I'll be in the front row. Yeah, because I like to know, how did you get your hair like that? Is she with him? Who is that guy? Yeah. That's why I have to sit in the front. And, yeah. So anyway, that thought just went. So I'm going to meetings with this lady every day, and so 30 days, and I'm gonna go out and drink tonight. And I go to this meeting, and I'm sitting in the front row, and this lady gets up at the podium. She's got on a Hawaiian shirt, one red sock, one blue sock. She's got a Christmas tree on her head. Not only did she have a Christmas tree on her head, but the damn thing lit up and was playing jingle bells, right? And she's like, hi, everyone. My name's Ricky, and if I don't drink between now and May 1st, I'll have 15 years. And I'm sitting in the front row and I went, yes, you're crazy. Yeah. And I said, oh, Jesus, if this works for you, maybe it'll work for me, you know. Then I started to listen, you know. I'd go to meetings and I'd hear things like the chapter to the obnoxious, and I'd know that I was in the right place. Yeah. And you know, I just kept coming back and 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 working those steps and working those steps and working those steps, you know. And I got to tell you, it's been a hell of a ride, and I'm glad I have a seatbelt. You know, I'm glad I have a seatbelt, and I just want to tell you a little bit about, you know, I'd love to tell you that when you come here and you get sober, that your whole life is just a cakewalk, but it's not. You know, that's just not how it goes. I had an opportunity to speak at the Cape May, New Jersey conference. And I called my son. I had 3 children and living, and 2 of them were active alcoholics, and one of them was a police officer right here in the city, Washington, D.C. And so I called him and I said, Sammy, I'm going to be speaking at Cape May, New Jersey. And he said, that's great. He said, I'll take the ferry across from Delaware and I'll meet you. And he came that night, you know, and we hung out with all these sober people, and he thought it was great, you know. And he worked in 7th District over near Anacostia, and he loved what he did. He absolutely just loved it, you know. He loved it. And he would call me up and he'd tell me these stories, and you know, and I'd just be like, oh my God. But anyway, so he came that night and we raced around Cape May, you know, we stuck our foot in the ocean. Everybody thought we were nuts. And it was in March, and we thought it was great. And we raced each other to the top of the Cape May Lighthouse, and that was in 2002. And we had so much fun, and he heard me speak for the first time, and he said, Mom, he goes, I don't know how you do that. He goes, but it's got to be a gift from God. And I realized today that's exactly what it is. You know, I wouldn't do a book report in school. You know, that I get to be up here in front of all of you is nothing short of a miracle. I mean, I fell off in a bar stool in Windham, Maine, you know, and here I am in Washington, D.C., you know. On May 1st of 2002, I got the phone call that no mother wants to get. My Sammy was dead. And, you know, he wasn't an alcoholic. He loved what he did down here. He absolutely loved it, you know. And I hung up from that. He died in Fairfax Innova Hospital. And I hung up. There was 10 minutes to 2 in the morning. And I had spoken with him on Monday, and he said he thought he had the flu. And this was Tuesday night at 10 minutes to 2, and he was gone. And I remember getting on my knees and saying, please, God, help me. Help me to get through this. And I prayed to the Blessed Mother. And for me, I just want to say that I prayed to the Blessed Mother because I was brought up Catholic, and I knew that the Blessed Mother knew what it was like to lose a son. My son was 33, and she knew what it was like to lose a son at 33 because she watched people murder her son. And I just asked her to come and be with me. And then I called one person in AA, called one woman in AA and said, oh my God, I could barely get the words out of you. You know, my son, this is his badge. My son is dead. And the next thing I knew, my house was full of people from AA. It was unbelievable. You know, I did service work. I still do service work. It's important to get involved, you know. And actually, I think service work is quite a lot of fun. It gets a bad rap. But if you're doing service work, you know what I'm talking about. You know, it's a lot of fun. And I've done a lot of service work, you know, and I've been responsible for roundups in my own state, and I know how much work that is, and my hats are off to the committee. Thank you very much. And And, my house filled with people, just filled with people, because they all knew me. They knew Lily, Lily, Lily's son died, and they all just came, and it was unbelievable, and my son had a hero's funeral, and all these cops from Washington, D.C. came to my little hometown of South Portland, Maine, and the huge funeral, huge. We're in the funeral home, and all these people are there, and all these cruises from Washington, D.C. People in my town thought they were making a movie about Washington, D.C. in South Portland, Maine. We're a gullible bunch there, and my son's police partner came up to me, and he put his arms around me, and he hugged me, and he said, Lily, he says, I've been to a lot of cop funerals. He goes, but I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen anybody with so many friends in my whole life. And I said, well, they couldn't all come. And he said, what? And I said, well, they wanted to, but when they got here and saw all these cruises, they kept on going. The boys from the dump on the hump weren't going to go in there with all those cops. And I asked my son one time what he'd do if he stopped a car with 6 naked people in it. He said, I wouldn't touch that with a 10-foot pole, Mom. There's a lot of paperwork involved in that, And I guess down here it's not that important. They don't care if you're riding around naked in your car. Anyway, my son had a hero's funeral, and he died on May 1st. We buried him on May 7th. My birthday was May 8th. On May 10th, I was down here for a blue mass. Well, not a blue mass. It was a memorial service in honor of my son. It was in a little Pentecostal church down in the 7th district. And all these cops, oh my God, I don't even know how many there were. There was a lot, I know that. I didn't count them, but there was a lot. And I'm riding in a cruiser, and we're going down the street to this church, and there's cops on both sides of the road standing. And when I got out of the car, the chaplain of the police department and the chief of police came over, and they said, are you going to be okay? And I thought, I don't know. And you know what? Something happened. They called me, and they said, will you speak at your son's service? And I had been trained in AA that when anybody asked you to do anything, the answer was yes. So I said yes, and I did my son's eulogy down here. But I'm going into that church, and I'm thinking, please, God, please. Just give me a little strength. Give me a little strength. Give me a little strength. And I walked in to this little Pentecostal church. They had the worst picture of my son I ever saw sitting on a piano. I was like, where the hell they dig that up? He was a handsome kid. If you ever watch Blue Bloods, the youngest kid on Blue Bloods, that's my son, looked just like that. Anyway, I walk in the door, get inside the church. The carpet was purple. I was like, I got it, Sam. I got it. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And what a send-off they gave him, and the people were so kind to me. So kind to me. And the women came up to me and they said, your son made a difference. He's the only cop that would say to us, how are you doing? He used to say, how you doing? And then he would listen, and he made great friends with a kid down here named Jerome. And he said to me, Mom, he said, I'm working with this kid, Jerome. He goes, and he's got a chance to make it out. And he's going to get an education, and he's going to get out. He's going to get out of this poverty cycle. And he called me one day, and he was sobbing. And I said, what's the matter? And he said, Jerome was killed today in a drive-by shooting. And it broke his heart, and it broke mine, and I didn't even know Jerome, And anyway, I never thought that I would be able to talk about my son, I loved him. I loved all my kids so very, very much. But I was an alcoholic mother, When they needed me the most, I was there the least, I'm here to tell you tonight that my daughter is celebrating 20 years of sobriety in March. Last Friday afternoon, at 10 minutes of 1, I got a phone call. My son is on life support at the Maine Medical Center in Portland, Maine, from drug and alcohol abuse. He had 10 years of sobriety, stayed sober when his brother died, and last Monday he was laying in a coma, dying from his disease. Alcoholism and drug addiction suck. I can't say anything else about it, I would ask you all to pray for him. His name is Tom. When I left to come here, he was still in the hospital. I have been going to Al-Anon. I think I've earned somewhat of a black belt because he said, Ma, I can't believe you're leaving me here. And I was like, well, I gotta go. I'm sorry, but I gotta go. And your choice has got you here, and my choice has taken me to Washington, D.C. I know that God has a plan for him. I just wish sometimes God knew I had a plate and not a platter. That beautiful house that I destroyed, guess what? I got to tell you the story because it's so crazy to me. So I tell my sponsor, well, they're going to foreclose on my house. What am I supposed to do about that? And she says, why don't you go to the bank and tell the manager that you're an alcoholic? I'm thinking, that's going to work. Yeah, great. That's a great idea. I thought I had some great ideas. That was a doozy, Yeah. So I go to the bank and I say, I'm an alcoholic. Yeah, we know. I said, well, I would like to pay this bill. And he said, we'd love to have you pay it. We don't want your house. And I thought he'd probably driven by, and that's why, I got to tell you that today I own that house. Because I paid them every dime. I had to make a financial amends when I got in here. I owed everybody and their brother money. I didn't have any credit. And today I have excellent credit. And I want to tell you that, that house is going on the market when I get home. I don't need that house anymore, and I'm going to sell it. And it's a beautiful home. It's been completely restored. It has all new windows, all new doors, nice carpet on the floor. It's a beautiful little house. And I just don't need it because, you see, today I have the privilege of taking care of my mother. My mother's 93 years old. She's a lot like that lady that was up here. She's got her full faculties and everything, but she has really, really bad arthritis. And so she can't move around as much as she'd like to move around. But I'll tell you, some days I think to myself, she gets around a hell of a lot better than I'd like her to. My car's leaving, she's in it, and I have a sponsor, and my sponsor tells me that I have a job to do. I have to meet with my sponsor. I always have to meet with my sponsor before I go on a trip to speak. And she always says to me, Lily, you have a job to do. And that's to go and let those people in Washington, D.C. know that AA is alive and well in the grand state of Maine. Yeah. She's a great sponsor. She's always been happy and joyous and free from the very day I met her. Gagged me with a spoon. I mean, I would days like, I don't want to be happy, joyous, and free, and I'm staying the hell away from her, and I thought they paid her to be at every meeting I was at, and today she's my sponsor, and, she's given me good orderly direction, and we've read all the AA literature, and we've worked the steps, and we've gone through the big book and every other book that's been printed by AA, and every piece of literature, and I gotta tell you that if I wasn't doing that, I'd miss it. If I wasn't doing that, I'd miss it. I absolutely love Alcoholics Anonymous. It has saved my life. It has taken me from being a pathetic, drunk, alcoholic mother whose kids needed her to a mother that can stand and walk with dignity and grace. When my son was buried, I walked behind that casket with my head held high with dignity and grace. Whenever I go out to speak, I try to do it with dignity and grace and to let you know that AA is alive and well in the grand state of Maine. Yes, it is. If you are ever in Maine, you can call me. My name is in the book. It's under Hanlon, because we're not supposed to say our last name. So you just look it up in the book when you come. And if you're ever in Maine, I'll give you the best tour of lighthouses you ever had, and I'll even take you for a good lobster roll. If you don't believe me, ask that guy up there that's taping. Yeah, he called me and he says, "Hey, Lily, we're in South Portland, Maine." I said, "I'll be right there," you know. And I got to tell you this other little story. You know, I spoke in the state of Washington, and this guy came up afterwards and he said to me, "My wife and I are going to be making a trip to Maine." And I said, "Great. If you come to Maine, you call me up. I'll take you on a tour and I'll take you to get lobster." Well, one morning, I'm now retired from that school, retired in good standing. And I worked my way up from being the bus driver to being the director of transportation, the assistant to the director, and I was in charge of discipline for these behaviorally challenged children. And but I identified with them, you know. I got it. And anyway, so one morning I'm sitting there in the rattiest nightgown I own. Now I got to tell you what my morning is like. I wake up and I do the same thing I always did. I have to say my prayers because if I don't, then I get busy and I forget. And my sponsor tells me I have to say my prayers before I can go pee, you know, because she said, "Lily, once you're up out of the bed and doing something, you know, all bets are off." And so anyway, so that's what I do. And then I like to go downstairs early in the morning and make a cup of coffee and just sit and watch mindless TV, CNN. I'm not really watching it. I just have it on. And I'm sitting there like a vegetable. And the phone rings. And this guy says, "Hi, Lily, this is Mike from Washington." I said, "Hey, Mike, how you doing?" He says, "Good." He says, "Remember you said if we come to Maine, we should call you?" And I said, "Yeah." I says, "Oh, when are you coming?" He goes, "We're here." I says, "Oh, where are you?" He goes, "I think we're in your driveway." I was like, "Now, move it, you know, run upstairs, try to get dressed, try to look like, you know, that lady that they were impressed with, because I'm not looking anything like that, I'll tell you." Anyway, Alcoholics Anonymous has been extremely good to me. Alcoholics Anonymous has given me a life that I never thought I would have. I still tell you that grace is amazing, that I'm standing here before all of you, a woman that fell off on a bar stool in Windham, Maine. I'd like to read you a little adaptation that I did of the footprints, and it goes like this. One night, a woman had a dream. She was looking down at the beach, and she saw a set of footprints drunkenly zigzagging in the sand. Yeah. Then she saw two sets of footprints, one large, one small, one hers, one God's. Next, the small footprints stepped into the large footprints and began to grow. Then once again, the footprints were zagging round and about with wild abandon. This really bothered her. She said to God, "When I asked for help, you came and walked with me." And God said, "Yes, I gave you the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And as you began to put them into practice, you began to grow." The woman replied, "Then God, I don't understand. If I was doing the footwork, what happened? Why the wild zigzagging again?" And God said, "Oh, my precious one, I would not abandon you. After you learned the steps, we danced." I want to thank all of you for allowing me to come to Washington, D.C. and share with you. There is a power in these rooms that can only be felt in these rooms. There is a power in the room when it's full of women that are all getting sober, staying sober one day at a time. Thank you. Thank you. Thank God for you. You are the wind beneath my wings.